Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the boss of one of Britain's biggest NHS trusts has resigned, delivering a warning to the government over the future and funding of the health service. Lord Kerslake, who until last night was the chairman of King's College Hospital in London, said rising demand and increasing costs, all amid the tightest budgets in recent times, were leading to unprecedented pressures. Our health and social care correspondent Victoria MacDonald reports.
In NHS terms, this is a high-profile resignation. The chair of King's College Hospital, Sir Bob Kerslake, standing down, he says, because of serious underfunding of the NHS.
It's been a really tough decision. I love King's. I think it's a fantastic hospital with great staff. But in the end, I felt that the government and the regulator were not facing up to some of the financial and other challenges that the NHS faces, and the right thing to do was to stand down.
Writing in The Guardian today, Sir Bob said King's, like many other hospitals, is fighting against the inexorable pressures of rising demand, increasing costs of drugs and other medical supplies, and the tightest spending figures in recent times. King's College is internationally renowned. We filmed there earlier this year after it performed a sickle cell transplant. But it has been struggling in recent times, and there was a question over whether Sir Bob jumped before he was pushed. Sources at the regulator NHS Improvement said he'd been asked to consider his position on Friday. They said a budget deficit of £38 million had been agreed for this year. Last week they forecast it would hit £92 million. Critics will also say that while he is a crossbencher in the House of Lords and former head of the civil service, he is also an advisor to the Labour Party. This was dismissed by the Shadow Health Secretary.
To suggest this is about party politics, I think, demeans the seriousness of the situation facing our NHS. And that is an NHS which is severely underfunded, where waiting lists have gone beyond 4 million, and where 565,000 people in the last year waited hours and hours on a trolley because they couldn't even get a bed in a hospital.
Sir Bob's resignation comes at a bad time for the government.
Judgment calls that will have to be made about what, amongst the other competing priorities, can realistically be delivered.
Simon Stevens, the head of NHS England, agreed that £4 billion extra was needed in the budget settlement. It received half that. And last week's figures showed pressures were mounting, with bed occupancy in some hospitals already at over 98%. And although trusts have prepared well for this winter, there is little give in the system.
Victoria MacDonald reporting.
Now back here, whether the crisis is about crippling waiting lists or A&E overcrowding, when it comes to the NHS, the elephant in the room is always whether the entire service itself needs slightly more radical surgery, which makes the departure of one of NHS England's senior figures rather significant. Today, the King's College Hospital Trust was put into special measures the day after Lord Kerslake left as its chairman. But in going, he also said the unsayable, that the NHS cannot, as he put it, stagger along from funding crisis to funding crisis without a fundamental review of how it is financed and run. Tonight, others are agreeing with him.
It's one of the UK's leading hospitals, serving 1 million across London. But today, King's was so mired in debt, it was put into special measures and its chair resigned. The first NHS resignation since the budget set hospital bosses and the government on a collision course. Former head of the civil service and Labour advisor told ITV News,
in the end, I felt that the government and the regulator were not facing up to some of the financial and other challenges that the NHS faces, and the right thing to do was to stand down.
It emerged he may have been forced to resign over chaotic hospital finances, but he had a wider point.
I think on the whole the public would say having a strong and effective NHS and care system would be really top on their priorities.
You think they'd accept higher income tax to pay for it?
I think they would. We have to carry on becoming more efficient. That's not a question that's in doubt for me. But push comes to shove, I think they would accept that to have the healthcare system they want and need, they will have to pay more for it.
The chief executive of Birmingham Children's Hospital tweeted in support, saying hospitals did not want to repeatedly be told to deliver the impossible. NHS providers, the organisation representing hospitals, said a long-term solution was needed. Whatever the specifics of Lord Kerslake's departure, many agree that funding isn't keeping pace with European neighbours. The UK spends 9% of its GDP on health, which falls below countries like France and Germany, spending just over 11%. Those countries have, however, adopted different ways of getting the money. In France, you pay up front for care and are reimbursed by the state later. In Germany, you must have health insurance, but this comes directly out of your pay. Lord Kerslake's poor hospital finances aren't unique.
8 out of 10 hospitals being in deficit suggests it's not individual financial mismanagement, it's a wider systemic problem of funding that's facing a number of providers of hospital services.
Jeremy Hunt is very critical of poor NHS leadership, but is more sympathetic to funding worries than he appears. ITV News understands the Health Secretary believes over the next few years NHS funding will need to be increased to French and German levels. But first, a difficult winter ahead. Allegra Stratton, News at 10.